My name is Austin. I am a senior data engineer at Experian, and I will be talking to you about Data 4.0, our new modern data platform. So, before I start, how many of you have actually heard of Experian before?
I've worked for it.
Yes. And how? Oh, good to know.
96.
We've got to talk.
I worked for the first day they got renamed Experian.
That was a long while back.
Yeah.
So, how many of you have actually used an Experian product? Okay, again, even better. So for those who haven't, Experian is a global data and technology company. What we provide is a consolidated view of a consumer or an organization's financial status, financial view. So we've got about 200 million customers worldwide, and within the UK, we've got 15 million customers. And most of these customers access us through our credit bureau, which is at the core of our business. So they access us through our website or our mobile application. And we get all this data because we ingest data from hundreds of sources. Every time we provide data to a customer or an organization, they provide us something back, and that's how we maintain such a large amount of data. And every time you apply for a loan, a mortgage, or a credit card, and you get an instant reply, that happens because of the data we provide them. That instantly lets them decide whether you are an acceptable credit risk and whether you're good enough to be their customer. And all of this finally comes together to become the consumer financial platform. Like I mentioned, this is where you download our app or go on our website, you sign up, you give us our details, and we collect all the information we can about you, and we provide you something that's very commonly known as the credit score. And we also provide you a chance to look at your credit report, which is the closest thing you get to see to what bank or a lender would see when they decide if you're credit worthy. And to power all of this, we need a lot of data. And on ECS, which is the consumer side of Experian, we had a legacy data platform that just wasn't doing it for us. It had been there for a while. A part of it was actually migrated from an on-premise cluster onto AWS a couple of years back. And this is what our legacy data platform looks like. The data flow in this is quite simple. You've got data being ingested from internal sources. You've got data being ingested from marketing. You've got event data from different sources, all of which come into S3. It gets processed in AWS Glue, SQL workflows, and gets served to different parts of the business through Glue Catalog as well as Redshift. In terms of data consumption, we have data being consumed internally for our BI dashboards. We have data going back into marketing. We have data going to external consumers. And we also have data being used for our AI and business requirements. So this is a very simplified form. All of this is hand-rolled AWS architecture that has been there for over 4 years. A lot of this was actually brought on, lifted and shifted from a Cloudera cluster, which was on-premise in Nottingham. And to put that into words, I'm going to split this into two parts, the build and the serve part. On the build part, we've got data being ingested. We've got bidirectional data flow for marketing. We've got raw data landing and being stored in S3. On the serve part, we've got Glue jobs processing, Glue jobs, SQL workflows, Lambdas processing the data, and data then being made available in real time to people who consume our data. And obviously, the obvious use case, we've got data being used for internal and external data science use cases. So this is all we had. And we got to a point where we were spending way too much time on maintaining the old platform than actually delivering value to the business. And we decided to completely move away from the hand-rolled architecture we have into a space where we're completely using managed services. And this is what we came to. So this is the Data 4.0 architecture. And as you can see, a lot of the custom stuff we had was replaced by managed tools, almost all of it. So to start off, on the left side, we have Snowplow, which does event capture for us. So event data from our application, backend, and web is all captured through a single point in Snowplow. It lands into Snowflake. We've got data from third-party sources and other internal sources such as DynamoDB and Aurora coming in through Fivetran into Snowflake. We also use the Snowflake marketplace to ingest data from other parts of the business such as credit data. So your credit data, which we have, actually comes into ECS through Snowflake marketplace and other sources. And then all the data that is in Snowflake is transformed from raw, refined, and from raw to refined already with dbt. So that is our take on the Medallion architecture. And Orchestra is the orchestration platform that actually helps us do all of this. on the legacy platform, we really did not have an orchestration capability, and now that we've got Orchestra, we finally have that. And on the usage side, the data is used in a very similar fashion. We've got data being used for machine learning and personalization use cases, data going back into Tableau and Mixpanel for BI, and data going back into Salesforce for other marketing use cases. We use activations by Fivetran to actually send data back into Salesforce. This is actually something we're exploring a bit more. We might be using it for more use cases further down the line. So looking at it in a similar way, we've got all the event capture being handled by Snowplow. So all the events from app, web, and backends are captured through a single pipeline. We've got Fivetran replacing all the custom architecture we had and custom jobs we had for data ingestion, and Snowflake has all the compute and storage. Orchestra helps us orchestrate all the DBT pipelines. Data is processed, data is available in Snowflake, and data is again served to BI and analytic platforms. And any additional data that's required throughout the business is sent. So I'm going to be going through all the different tools that actually helped us make data 4.0 happen. So I'm going to be going through them one by one and actually tell you guys what it did for us and how we made it happen. So I'm going to be starting off with Snowplow. So Snowplow was one of the foundational things that actually helped data 4.0 happen, because it helped us move away from all the custom architecture, and it also helped us standardize events being raised by 8 different domains within the business. These domains have complete freedom in how they used to raise events, and it was quite hard getting 8 different teams to actually raise them in a singular way. And we made that happen with Snowplow. So they start off by setting trackers in their services. Trackers then send events which are collected by Snowplow. These events are validated. Once these events are validated, they are then enriched with IP information, UTM parameters, any other custom context that we might require. The data then lands in a very wide table called as atomic table in Snowflake. So every time we have a major version change for an event, we have a new row that's added to the table. So if you want to visualize this table, imagine a diagonal, imagine a table where you only have data in the diagonal. That's what this table would look like. This was actually quite a concern for us at the very start, where we were quite concerned, how do you manage a table that's so wide when each and every event that you have goes into this singular table? And they actually have something called the Snowplow Unified DBT packages. So the Snowplow Unified DBT package runs on top of this very wide table and gives us a single space from where we can actually extract our raw events into DBT tables. So putting that into text again, we have app events, web events, and backend events. All events come into Snowplow. We have schema validation happening. The events are enriched and they all pass into Snowflake. So this single tool for us replaced a very hectic SNS, SQS, Lambda event capture architecture, where we had to constantly maintain, upgrade, and monitor the platform. And all of that has been replaced by a single tool. And continuing with data ingestion, we have Fivetran. So Fivetran did something very different for us. We had a lot of third-party data sources and other backend services where we used to get data from. Every time we needed to bring data in from one of these sources, we had to write custom code. There was no standardized way of actually writing this custom code. After around 4 years of having a data platform, any standards that were there slowly disappeared. And every time you create something custom, you have to maintain it. Lambdas need upgrades. You need to upgrade the Python versions. There's always something that needs to be done. And eventually we got to a point where when the business wanted data from a new source, it took anywhere from a couple of weeks to a couple of quarters to actually get that data into our data warehouse, which in any case is not ideal. Waiting a couple of months when a product owner wants data in just doesn't work. But after we managed to bring in Fivetran, we went from all that custom code to maintain to almost zero code to maintain. We no longer had to worry about what happens when any upstream data sources change or they have a new schema change. It is automatically handled by Fivetran, meaning we get enough time to actually make any downstream changes that we need to handle any upstream changes. We no longer have to manage change data capture ourselves. It's all inbuilt. Again, that's hours of effort where we constantly have to update these tables. And finally, once the business and the security says yes, it takes us minutes to actually get data into our warehouse compared to the weeks before. So you go from needing weeks or months or quarters to actually get data in to just minutes. Yeah, this was a whole game changer for us because product owners are much happier the fact that they can get data in, they can start doing their stuff much faster. So moving on to the next tool, we have Snowflake, which is why I'm here. We used to be on a provisioned Redshift cluster, which meant that we were quite limited in what we can do. So one of the biggest issues was on a provisioned Redshift cluster, production jobs always take priority. Every time an analyst or someone had to run an additional job, we had to make sure that that job does not affect the production job. So there was often cases where we had to limit the kind of jobs they could run and the kind of how long we could run those jobs for. Whereas with Snowflake, we don't really have to worry about that anymore. We have virtual warehouses being spun up, so they can run as many jobs as they like. And when you have a provision cluster, every year you have a meeting where you spend engineering effort to estimate how much time, how much compute you will need for the following year. So you've got to calculate the amount of compute you need a year in advance and actually tell that to the business. We no longer think about that. It's all managed. Cost line. So even with all this planning we had, our actual cluster usage was around 30%. So 70% of what we paid for Redshift was not actually being utilized. So these were all the storage and compute reasons why we actually realized we needed something better than Redshift, and we decided to move to Snowflake. And on the governance and compliance side, we had a separate data ops team of around 3-4 people based in both the US and the UK, managing all the Redshift access, compliance, etc. But with Snowflake, we no longer require that team. We have it all being managed through Terraform and Okta. So the last two are more of like a personal view. I personally feel that when you actually work with a lot of nested data, it is much easier and much more comfortable to work with them in Snowflake compared to Redshift. Similarly, when you have non-technical stakeholders who actually want to go in and look at the data, Redshift was quite a pain. I've seen product owners and non-technical stakeholders actually do more in Snowflake within a couple of weeks than they've done in months. So these are one of the biggest. So at the end of the day, Snowflake gave us a faster, leaner, and safer way to actually look at our data compared to what we previously had. And moving on to the last tool that really made Data 4.0 happen for us, that would be Orchestra. So in the previous data platform, we really had no way of orchestrating things. The closest thing we had to an orchestrator like Airflow, Orchestra, or Dagster was step functions. So we would have step functions which trigger sequels, and we would have a cascade of step functions triggering sequels, which was quite a pain because when something fails, everything fails, and you've got to rerun the whole thing from start. But with Orchestra, we were able to see what happens. Every job we had, we could trigger all of them in a single place. There were no more scattered crons. All of our DBT pipelines or all of our DBT PRs are work in sync with Orchestra, where we are directly integrated with them on GitHub. So every time something fails, we know exactly where something failed. We can go directly into the problem, fix it without too much hassle. Yes, with the observability and alerting capability we got from Orchestra, we went from a point where stakeholders were letting us know that there was missing data in their tables to a point where we were getting instant alerts every time a job failed. We could go in and fix the issues we had even before stakeholders knew that data was missing. And finally, data lineage. In our legacy SQL transformations, lineage was more of a spaghetti mess because we never could actually go in and see what was going to happen. Every time someone changes a table, there is something else that breaks because no one really knew what affects what. Whereas now we have an end-to-end view of everything that happens within the data platform, and we can actually be prepared for something that might happen. So these are all the tools that actually helped us build Data 4.0, and this is what for us at Experian is the new data platform, the next generation of data platforms. Okay, thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Any questions? Yes, Mark. Thanks for that great presentation.
Thank you.
I didn't catch why you are using Orchestra over Airflow. You mentioned Airflow briefly.
Oh, yes.
Is it a one like comparison, and what was your reason for Orchestra?
Both Orchestra and Airflow are orchestration tools. One of the reasons we went with Orchestra is because we wanted a managed tool. We didn't really want to get another open source tool where we have to spend more and more engineering effort into managing, upgrading, maintaining, monitoring an open source tool. We wanted something that was plug and play. We also wanted something which non-technical stakeholders could use. And one of the reasons I was the one who personally did all the transformation and orchestration POCs. One of the reasons I recommended Orchestra was that anyone who's non-technical can go in and use the tool. They can plug and play. They don't need to learn to code. You can either use configurations to set up things on Orchestra, or you can use the UI. And everything, even if you use the UI, is still maintained in configurations. So you get the best of both worlds.
What about managed services for Airflow?
At that point, you still have to upgrade Airflow. You are still responsible for upgrading. So I've used Airflow in multiple organizations before. I've used open source Airflow. I've used managed Airflow from AWS. I've used Astronomer. In all those cases, you still have issues where you need to manage it, and still people have to write the Python code which runs Airflow.
I have a similar question about Fivetran. How did you pick that?
Sorry?
How did you pick Fivetran?
Fivetran. I think we looked at a few different tools out there, and we decided to go with Fivetran because they had the most data sources available. Yeah, and they also had the best reliability scores out there.
Thank you. I couldn't take notes fast enough during that.
I'm really sorry.
No, that's a
I
good
feel like I
thing.
lost a bit of time at the start, so I just.
Yeah. One thing you said was you reshare your apps using the marketplace.
Yes.
Like some of your data comes in, you share it back to the marketplace to other parts of the
Yes.
organization. Of all the sharing options, why marketplace? Why was that good fit?
Yeah. So a part of our business, which actually stores and takes care of all the credit data, they run on Snowflake, and they actually provide. So if anyone actually wants to use Experian data, you can actually go on Snowflake and request it. So that part of the business has been using Snowflake for a while, and that is one of the reasons it was available there. And so as far as we were concerned at ECS, it was much easier for us to actually get the data through the marketplace than find another way to get it in.
Thank you.
So you're using marketplace as a source rather than a distribution sort of mechanism?
So a lot of data
for 4.0.
Sorry?
For data 4.0.
Yes. A lot of data 4.0 is still evolving. It's only been about less than a year since we started it. We went from tool evaluations to POC to first production in about 8 months, which was very fast, and everything has been happening very fast. So a lot of those things that make up data 4.0 are still very much evolving. We're making decisions. So if anyone has any recommendations on how we can make it even better, I would love them.
Sure, plenty of people have lots of ideas.
The move over to managed services, did you have many problems to do with pre-production environments, getting the engineering team on board?
When you say engineering team, who do you?
So the team behind you, for
Yeah.
instance, they've got a lot of autonomy, they've got a lot of hands-on, especially when it comes to things like doing a QA environment, UAT environment, testing these things out. They're normally a lot more problematic with managed services
Yeah.
than they are when you get hands-on and configure an env variable. How did you deal with those aspects?
Yeah, it was definitely quite a challenge at start because especially on the far left of the diagram where we have data coming in from events, you have software engineering teams who are quite often very accustomed to using, they would have a develop environment, they would have an intermediate, they would have staging, they would have production, and they expect all of these and they expect all of these when they use a managed service, and obviously managed services don't work the exact same way. So we found areas where we can actually isolate everything production from pre-prod and still give them a similar way. For example, instead of having 4 different accounts for Snowflake, we have 2 accounts where we have just develop in one account and we have integration, staging, and pre-production in another account. So we've tried to isolate things where possible. For example, Orchestra, we have separate pipelines for that. And in Fivetran, we have separate connections for both production and pre-production.
Yes, please.
So you said data 4.0 is evolving.
Yes.
What's next?
I think the business has ideas. Personally, I would want to, this is my personal opinion, personally, I would want to take another look at what happens on the far right. we've really redone everything that happens on the far left, which is the data ingestion and data transformation. But on the far left, where you have data visualization and analytics, we've not really done much. And as also with reverse ETL, we currently only have Fivetran activations being used to send data back to other places. That's something I would definitely like to look into a bit more. I feel like there is much more we can be doing there.
Thanks.
Press the button. Sorry, mate. I was just going to say, maybe I'll turn it off. It's fine. I'll just talk later. Can you maybe give the folks a couple of examples of just like, you know, the sheer scale and the impact of what's being done here, like in logging and onboarding and stuff? Because I remember when I first spoke to you about this, I was pretty amazed by how much stuff this was all underpinning.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I think we've had. I'm trying to think of what a really good way to say the scale is. I mean, obviously, we've got 15 million customers in the UK, and we've got data from 15 million customers coming in every day. And I think at least a third or 2/3 of them actually use the application and website every day. And over the last month, we've got about 65 million events coming in, and specifically on the domain which Hugo just mentioned, this domain was really troublesome because they recently just redid all of their events and they were in a completely different format to what we were expecting. So we actually had to take the whole domain through what Snowplow is and actually get them on board on tracing events in a very new fashion. So I think the bigger task was a cultural thing where we had to get different domains in the business to actually do things in the same way.
I think you mentioned 600 plus data sources.
Yes.
Fun times. Mark, did you have another question?
On the ingestion side, so you're fully betting on Fivetran for basically everything, right?
Yes.
Have you thought about trying out OpenFlow, which is rather new thing since November?
Yes. Again, the business wanted to go with in a direction where we can get as much things done with minimal people. We didn't really want to bring in, because we've already suffered through having open source tools and having hand-spun architecture where you're dealing with maintenance. So we didn't really want to go towards an open source solution at this point. We were quite intent on having a managed solution.
Yeah, OpenFlow is a Snowflake managed solution, right? Which has native connectors to, I don't know, like GCP, Salesforce, SharePoint, and so on and so forth. But it's rather new as far as I understand.
Yeah. I think that was more of a decision on us, and we wanted something that was more secure. Experian is it's a very old organization. They are quite adamant on having things that are secure, things that are that feel safe. So.
I'm sure someone else can comment on it. No? Looking at you, Chris. Think of the part of my lady. Okay, fine. Thanks, Austin. Anybody else? Any other questions?
Anyone else?
Yeah.
When you talked about getting your the domains kind of on board with doing everything the same way, do you have any tips on doing that? Because that is like herding cats.
Unfortunately, the best way to get them to do it is, again, my personal opinion, you start off with the easiest people who are kind of willing to get on board, and then at the end of the day, it's more like they get FOMO where like, yeah, everyone else is doing it, you kind of have to do it too now. So you start off with the easiest and you slowly make your way through. There's no really easy way to get multiple domains on board, especially a domain which has been independent for a while. They are quite hard set in their ways. There's really no easy way to convince them, unfortunately.
I think given, for me, given the collaboration today with data engineer things, I'm sure there's an awful lot of interest on the left side of that chart and on the middle of it. My personal interest will be much more on the right-hand side of the chart, so very interested to see what you do next, and maybe you could come back in a couple of months and
hopefully
and tell us how you've managed to succeed on your analytics and distribution of the data.
Thank you.
As well. Right, any more questions? Thank you very much, Austin.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys.